Welcome to another episode of Balancing Acts. I'm your host, Linda Hamilton, and this is the show dedicated to business owners who work hard every day, constantly balance competing priorities for time and money, and are trying to navigate the intricate dance of growing a successful, profitable business while keeping a healthy cash flow and keeping your personal sanity in your own personal life. So, becoming aware of the challenges and opportunities we talk about on this show are things that can help you avoid the common mistakes we see business owners make. Balancing Acts will bring you expert advice, practical tips and strategies, and inspirational stories from other business owners. We are so fortunate to have Bobby Klink with us today because we're going to talk about legal stuff. Not always your favorite topic for small business owners, but protecting your business is just as important as growing and profiting. So, Bobby is a Harvard Law School graduate. He is not your typical lawyer, and he doesn't do suits in his words, but hates legalese more than you do. And he has a tendency to make bad pop culture references and dad jokes. With his extensive career of 20 plus years in the legal industry, he's now focusing on making the legal stuff simple for online business owners. And he and his team have developed the Plainly Legal software to automate legal protection for coaches, course consultants, course creators, service providers. And if there was ever a contradiction in the same sentence, it's words simple and legal. So, Bobby, it's so great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, Linda. I'm happy to be here, and I do want to say that when you said we're going to talk about legal stuff, I hope people don't just go running screaming, because I know that can be the reaction a lot of people have. But I try to make it easy and fun, and it's been a long journey. I practiced law starting back in 2002, and it took me about 15 years to start to evolve out into creating a business rather than being a lawyer first. And I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Fantastic. So you've played a number of roles in the legal professional, from prosecutor, working for judges. Um, what was it? Was there a pivotal moment that led you to actually starting your own law practice, which was, I think, your first role as a business owner, right?
Yeah, that's right. But it really starts even before that. My dad was a business owner. He owned a chain of drugstores in Deep South Texas. Basically, it was kind of the Walgreens or the CVS of Deep South Texas. And so I was introduced to the concept of owning your own business and being in charge of your life pretty much my whole life. But I was a lawyer for, I guess it was about 12 years before I really ventured out. But it was because of a mistake I'd made 10 years or 4 years earlier. So in 2010, I was transitioning out of a position as an assistant United States attorney, which is the federal prosecutor. I was one of those guys who got to stand up and say, I'm Robert Klink. Don't call me Robert, but that's my formal name, on behalf of the United States of America. And I did that for 3 years. I was transitioning out in 2010, and I decided to kind of take a different turn. Up to that point, my career had been very much what someone going to a very top law school, working at top law firms, love to do. But at that point, I joined a small entrepreneurial firm in the Washington, D.C. area and made the classic entrepreneurial mistake. I jumped in without an agreement. Now, we had an agreement, but not really. We had a bit of an agreement, but nothing about what was going to happen long term in my involvement with the firm, which, by the way, for most lawyers, that's normal. The problem was this was a firm where I would go months without getting paid because it was often contingency fee work. So I had all the downside risk and no guaranteed upside. Then my wife got pregnant with my daughter in 2013, and I started to negotiate with them and say, hey, how can I formally become a partner in the firm, be an owner with these other two guys? And we tried negotiating it. We tried working it out, and we never could make it work. And a fateful day, it was snowing. I remember it was my old house. My office at the time, my home office, was in my basement of my old house. And I was holding my 3-month-old daughter on a Sunday night during a conference call when things became clear, to me at least, that we were not going to be able to work things out. And at that point, I went out and hung my shingle, created a law firm called Klink LLC. Didn't know what I was going to do, quite honestly, because I'd never really marketed before, hadn't thought about it, but that was the start of the journey. And since then, so that was in early 2014. Since then, I've done a lot of things, but I started that firm because we didn't have a written agreement in place. We didn't do the right things the right way. We didn't talk about those hard decisions up front. And so as a result, things went bad. And I tell people that the worst part of that kind of breakup with those two partners in the firm, one of those guys had flown through Hurricane Sandy on a 10-person plane from Miami down to the Bahamas to be there at my wedding. I haven't talked to him since 2014. And that kind of gives you a sense of the things that can happen. It's not just money, it's not just those things, but if you don't deal with these things, sometimes it really affects your personal life in ways you don't want to think about.
That is so true. And whether you own a legal practice, an accounting practice, or any type of partnership or joint venture with another business owners, we see it all the time. Um, yes, so true. So after starting your practice, I happen to know a little bit about your backstory with marketing, and as I say, you're an attorney with a very varied experience and full experience when it comes to business. So, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced in the early years, and how did you overcome it?
Well, so when I was starting my law practice, the big problem was I knew absolutely nothing about marketing. Quite honestly, at that point, I was you might call it the prototypical lawyer who thought of marketing as a dirty word, because that's a lot of the ways that lawyers are raised. If you think about it, lawyers sneer at what we call ambulance chasers, but basically the lawyers in the work or in kind of the sphere I had been at were the people who looked down on anyone who did any kind of marketing. And so I had to learn that as a skill. And I started by trying to learn marketing for lawyers. I read books about that. I talked to people about that. But quite honestly, that was just really bad advice because lawyers aren't great marketers. And when they talk about marketing, it's often write blog posts for other lawyers to read, hang out with other lawyers, spend time with other lawyers. I'm like, wait, but those aren't my clients. And so it didn't really work. So that was my first foray. But eventually I kind of fell down this rabbit trail or through the looking glass, whatever we want to say, that is online marketing. And I first found it through a company called HubSpot. If people don't know, they came up with this idea called inbound marketing, which is you create marketing, you create content, and then that brings people to you. They were the ones who came up with this as an idea. And I fell into that world, started learning. I had a lot of time because I didn't have a lot of clients early on. So I spent a lot of times learning that stuff and started using those practices to build my law firm practice. That worked fine. And I was able to kind of build a practice, but I was also going through a bit of a malaise in my life. And I started working with a life coach. And this would have been a couple of years, probably 2.5 years into my law firm. And I talked with her and we started about life and relationships and all those things. And after about 6 months of that, she asked me, she said, well, let's talk about your work for a little bit. And she asked me what I call the question. She said, do you like what you do for a living? And I fumbled. And for the first time, I admitted to someone other than my wife that the answer was no. And it's not that I don't love the law. I love the law. I find the law incredibly fun. I find the challenges of talking about the law, of thinking through these questions, a lot of fun. The problem was the practice of law is very different from that. And especially what I was doing. I was a litigator. So I was in fights all the time. I spent my days fighting with people, often about some of the stupidest things in the world. And what I mean by stupid, I'm not talking about the actual case. I'm talking, I would have to get in fights with opposing counsel to get them to give me legible copies of documents. And that was the kind of thing that drove me nuts. At the same time, I was having to miss my daughter's various events because my schedule was controlled not by me, but by opposing counsel, by judges, by all these other people who they would file a motion and I would have a week to respond, or a judge. There were multiple cases where a judge said, we're having a hearing in 2 days. You must be here in person. This was pre-COVID. Now, maybe this wouldn't be the case now, but literally I would have to jump on a plane to go across the country from Washington, D.C. to California for a hearing. And that was getting really old. And so that was the start of something different. So it would have been in early 2016 or maybe early 2017, I guess. And as life coaches tend to do, she wouldn't let me just wallow. She said, okay, what are we going to do about that? And so I didn't have an idea at the time, but we started talking. And ironically, me being here is full circle because I do this quite a bit. But she said to me, she said, you know what? I could see you going on to radio shows, podcasts, other media, and talking to business owners about the legal stuff. And I said, huh, it's an interesting idea. And as someone who's kind of a fire, ready, aim kind of person, I took a quick action. So by the time I had my next meeting with that life coach, it was about, I think it was 2 weeks later, I'd already hired a podcast booking agency to get me booked on a number of podcasts to start talking about this stuff. And it was funny. I didn't have a business at the time that I could really send people to because it wasn't for my law firm and didn't have a plan, but I just knew I needed to get into action and get going. And that's what I did.
And I think many business owners do face some of these challenges with what they want to do, and they're not always quick to take action, which actually can really slow down your growth and get you into a bind. So I think we can all learn from how you approached those things. How do you balance the demands of your business life with your personal life?
So I balance it by being able to control my schedule and schedule things the way I want to. And what that means is sometimes people would, or outside people wouldn't think I have balance because they would see me working on the weekend or working at night. But I do that because it allows me to randomly in the middle of an afternoon say, you know what, it's a beautiful day out. And look over at my wife and say, hey, do you want to go to a lunch date? Do you want to go take our dog to the dog park? Do you want to go do those kinds of fun things? And for example, yesterday, my brother-in-law came over and we put together a trampoline for my daughter. So there's things like that I'm able to do in the middle of the day that I couldn't do if I had a more traditional job. And I want that level of control. And so I balance that way by choosing when I'm going to work and when I'm going to be having fun.
I love that. A trampoline in your backyard. I hope you will balance the risks and rewards of jumping on that trampoline with your daughter. And we're going to take a commercial break. It was great that you shared your insights about your business growth. When we come back, we're going to talk about how you developed Plainly Legal software to help online business owners.